you in Affinity Designer. All will apply. So thank you for joining me, and let's dive on in. So straight away you can see that I have moved a little bit around with where we got to on Tuesday in part 1. So I haven't sized anything or scaled anything, I've just literally grouped them and moved them so that we can work with them today. Now we need to continue on that path to fill out our entire sheet, mainly because if you want to save material, you have to be able to fill that full sheet straight off the bat, because once we then start cutting into that sheet, you're not going to be able to feed that back through your printer, and certainly not in a way that you're going to be able to align the registration marks. So it's good practice to either pick a theme when you're doing this, or to work out for all the different projects that you're working on how many stickers you're going to need and fit those onto one sheet. Okay, so let's zoom on in. And we're going to do this next row just here. So I'm not going to zoom in too far at this stage because I'm still bringing in images that might be slightly larger. So this time I'm going to go import from your computer, and I might have to go back to where our image was yesterday. Yep. Okay. And there's our autumn gnome. And give Dropbox a little time. So when you're working on your computer at home, you're going to see that bit go so much quicker. Okay, so we've got our PNG file. I'm going to open him up, and as I said before, he's going to come in quite big. Okay, so what we want to do, drag that corner and move him down. Then we can click and drag to bring him back up, and get him down this way. Okay, so I'm not going to go too small this time. Now I'm going to use him over here as a guide for colours. So if I go a little bit bigger, just so I can have a bit more of a target to aim for, and I'm going to stick him off the side of my mat. So this is just literally so I can use him as an eyedropper location. Okay, so I'm going to click off that, and I'm going to start by creating some little label shapes. So let's bring in our first one. I'm going to size that down. Okay, and if you get to a point where you think, okay, I'm going to be wanting this shape longer rather than the size it's kind of scaling down to, don't worry, we can do that quite easily. So concentrate on getting the height right first, and if it helps, if we go into edit, we can actually see that height in here. Now I always find that when I'm working small, I'd rather swap to millimeters, so I can go to artboard, and I'm just going to change millimeters in there. Okay, so we can see that we have a height of 8.7 millimeters, which is just shy of 1 centimeter. So depending on your planner, then that may be big enough. It might be that you want to go a bit smaller, but for me, I'm going to stay at that point. I'm going to click again so that we get our nodes. I'm going to click and drag the box over one end of nodes, so every node in that end is selected. I'm then going to use press and hold shift and tap the right arrow, and that's going to help us very quickly extend that shape. and then click off that shape to go back to our normal selection. And we have our box. Okay, so I'm going to pop in a colour into that box, and we're going to do that by going to our eyedropper. So click once on the little eyedropper icon, go across and pick a colour out of your gnome. So I'm going to start off with the green. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a circle and drag that in. And we're going to give that circle a fill of white. So you're going to see that your grid behind vanishes. Okay. Now, normally what I'd say is, because we're going to be printing rather than cutting this, is to take that line out. But obviously at this point we've got a white shape on a white background, so it would be a bit daft to do that. So I'm going to scale that down, move that over my label, so then I can go, need to move up just a little bit more. Okay, I can nudge that with my arrow keys to get it where I want it. Okay, and once we're happy, then we can go to our line colour and we can take that line away entirely. In our layers panel, we're then going to say that that shape there is then going to draw. Okay, and I'll get into a bit more detail about the draw function and print to cut next week. So do join me live, and that will be on YouTube at 11 AM on Tuesday. Okay, so we've got the start of our first label, and it could be that we put our text in. So let's do that here first. And let's say appointment. I'm going to hit enter. And again, we can use any font that we want to because we're not cutting it. And I'm going to pop that over my label. And I'm going to take away that outline. I'm going to go to the fill colour and stick that in white. And at this point we can still change that text if we want. So you want to go for something fairly bold whenever we're putting white text over a coloured background. Otherwise you can tend to find that your text kind of fills in when you're printing. Some printers are better than others. So photo printers, for instance, you don't get as much creep of that colour into your white. But certainly if you're working with just your standard office printer, then just bear that in mind when you choose your text. Okay, so that is one way of doing it. Another way is that we could actually have that label so it's actually paler. Hang on. Now, here's another trick for you. So I've brought that image in as a guide and I'm not actually going to use it. So I'm just going to lock it so that way I can't accidentally click on it. That way when we do our selection, much easier. So let's group that again. And we're going to duplicate it. And that's a good way of working whenever we have something that needs to keep a design feature the same throughout. So what do I mean? So in terms of the position and size of this circle in relation to this outer shape, we want to keep that the same. But the colour of our shape is going to change. So we could go and just pop in a colour out of our little crayon box. It could be that you use your colour wheel. It could be that you use your sliders if you're comfortable with using the sliders. Or you can just use your different system palettes. So if I go in here, I've got lots of different ones. And you can see that it's even pulled through the ones that I've put in as system palettes in Affinity, which can be really handy when we're looking at doing print to cut. So there you go. How cool is that? And if I go into some icons, we can see it's also going to give us the values as well, unless we've renamed something, which is quite funky. So this one's quite a good one for matching our little design here. And the text then we might take out entirely and actually write by hand, for instance. Or we can change the font and the text totally independently. So something to bear in mind, that when you're designing your labels, you'll notice I started off with a nice long word first. And the reason that we do that is if you go for your longest word first, that means you haven't got to resize your text as you then decrease your word size. If you were to start at the smallest and size for your smallest word, 9 times out of 10 you're going to find that you've got to readjust everything, and there isn't an automatic process for doing that within Canvas itself. Okay, so we could have shopping. Now you're going to notice that I'm typing in upper and lower case letters, but my font is just doing capital letters, and that all goes down to the actual font design itself, so it's not Canvas doing that. There is no way of changing a case easily in Canvas Workspace. So if I then go enter, we can see that it's kept that left hand alignment. So if you wanted to right align, then you would end up having to select the two elements of text and right aligning them. But for now, I think that's good enough. If you don't want to use the duplicate button, we can press and hold Alt and click and drag over that group, and we're going to create another copy. And again, we can go down to a bottom shape and we can change the colour. Now, because this is a nice pale colour, I'm going to say that might be something that I keep as a custom label. So I can just delete that text altogether. And we would work through as many of these labels as we needed. So let's pick this colour, and we're going to go to that same orange colour, but we're going to tone it down so that we've got kind of a tint going on. And if you want to go back to having some text ones, we can do that the same way. So just Alt and drag, and we can fill our sheet. So if we go into this one, we might change colour again. Blue isn't really going to work, but we've got a nice grey there. So I'm going to go to my shopping one here, and this time let's use the eyedropper. And there's a nice red colour in our little Tomty over here. So you want to try and get the pixel where it actually captures that best. There we go. So we now have a nice red colour. I'm not too worried about the actual descriptions on these at the moment. We can come back and we can change those, because we aren't working with Victor Path or anything like that. It's going to stay editable. Okay, let's drag a few more of these out, and that way we're going to have a good set of labels for our pages. So this started as a back to school project. So this could be, you know, school subjects for instance, or homework. So I'm going to go down to the shape, pick a colour, let's pull that one out there. Next one, pick a colour, and we can go to a darker orange, maybe even slightly darker still, because that's pretty close to what we've got from our Summer Icons colours. Okay. Next one, let's go to the green of his hat, so the lip trim. So then we've got 2 shades of green. Next one, we're going to go and pick out the grey. I won't go for the lighter grey, it's going to be too close to that white for our little circle to show up, so that's just something to bear in mind. Okay. Next one. And what's interesting is it's trying to pick up the closest colours in here for what we have selected on here. It's funky. That one's going to struggle with because there's nothing that's kind of close. And let's go. This kind of terracotta colour from his sleeve, because that's really autumny. And all these colours that we're pulling out we could then use elsewhere in our labels too. So let's try and get this brown colour that's in the centre there. And I'm going to pick this nice yellowy colour too. So we've got a good range of label colours, and then we can go back and edit the text as we need to. So if you have any questions, this is a live premiere, so I can see the chat after, and I will try and answer questions in the comments as and when. So let's go for club. I'm not going to say what kind of club, I'm just going to put club. We might have one that says travel. So again, I'm just going to click on that word to get to that active state. So busy time. We might have one that says class. Now this grey one is quite light, so I could actually go and just delete that, just so I have another one that I can customise. This green one here. Let's have exercise. Let's face it, we're back to school, that can be taken in so many different ways. Okay. Day out would be good. Hang on. Yeah, if it does that, don't worry, just stop. Go back to it. There we go. Day out. And a few different appointment ones are good. Don't need that many shopping ones. So let's just change that one. If you're not sure where in a document that shape is, if you click on the group, you're going to see that it's highlighted in blue over here. So then we know that the text layer is going to be the layer that we want to edit. Click on it again, actually on the mat, and we'll be able to get into that edit mode. And it might be that you have a favourite subject. So here's an example where if you have a word that's longer, you're going to end up wanting to resize it. But on this occasion, I can just take that way off and just use photograph. I know what I mean. There we go. So we have our first kind of planner stickers set up and ready to go. Next, I did say on Tuesday that I was going to show you how to do a kind of panel design using these techniques as well. So, first of all, I'm going to bring in a basic shape. Let's go for this one. Now, at larger sizes, this one I always find a bit weird and it looks a bit childish and a bit clunky. But if we scale it down, it actually starts to look not too bad. It's kind of one of those shapes that works better at a smaller size. Okay. And we'll give it a colour. So just drop a colour in there. I'm then going to bring in a rectangle. So I could have done an offset there and set it inside and kept the original. But for now, I'm just going to get my little rectangle, sit that in here. I'm going to stretch that rectangle to fit. Okay, and let's give it another colour. So we could pop in white. You don't have to use another colour, but let's go yellow. Okay, I'm going to duplicate that shape. I'm going to offset it slightly, and I'm going to give that the grey colour. Now we don't have to go and click back in the palette if you're not sure which one it is that you clicked on. You can do it straight off the actual document. Okay, now it's still going to give you the same colour, so it's not like the older Affinity where it used to then capture that from the display, so there was always a little bit of a risk of not getting a colour accurate match. Okay, so then we're going to drop that box down behind our colour panel, and that's going to give us a shadow. Now all these shapes are currently set to draw and have black outlines, so we need to fix that. So I'm going to click on the line colour so that then our colours change, and we can then go and put in a different line colour. So on the shadow there, I just popped in a bit of grey. Hopefully that make it look like it fades out a little bit. On our little yellow panel, we can take that line out entirely, and we have a kind of faux floating panel. On this background layer, we can just pop it in a colour. So even if it doesn't quite colour or cut exactly where you want it to, if you haven't got that black line, it's not going to be quite so obvious. Now, speaking of which, if you are finding that when you're cutting the alignment isn't quite right, it's unlikely using this method, but just in case, here's a way that we can actually get around that, and we can create faux bleeds by using the line width. So it's one of the rare occasions where this is actually useful, and we can increase that line width. You can see that line then goes beyond your bounding box, so that means that your cut line goes down the centre of this line here. Okay, and you can change that colour if you want to. If you want to have it so it's the same colour as that centre colour, that's fine. And there we go. Going back to our layers panel, we're also going to set that to draw and that to draw, and then we can group those elements together. So that's Command G or Control G on a PC, and job done. You can then add in your text or your image to finish off that layout. So we've locked our little gnome there. Now we could unlock him and copy him across, but let's go back to our original file, and this time, rather than bringing the colour one, we've got a little black and white version. Okay, now he's only going to be small, so it doesn't matter too much. about matching them up in terms of colour, but there is a way that we can do it within Canvas. So first of all, let's get them scaled right. So I'm going to pop him so his little feet are just above the bottom of my sticker, because as we size him down, he's going to kind of slowly drift downwards anyway. So he's going to be small, very small indeed. I can just pop him on there, like so. So he's got no white in him either, so that's just something to bear in mind in terms of if we were to drop, well actually I'm going to drop him between the two layers of our squares here. And at the moment you'll be thinking, well, you can't see him because the orange is so solid. So we're going to go to fill and we're going to lighten up that opacity. But because he's got that grey underneath, he's still not going to show up that clearly. So what you could do, for instance, is if you have a black and white where the white is actually in the centre, then you're going to be able to do that method to just tint that line work. But for now, let's pop him back up the top. And there we go. We've got a little sticker with a little gnome. And we could also do there's an SVG version as well for all these files that I'm working with. So you could use that to still create a cut file if you wanted to. But for the most part, because we don't want all that intricate line work to actually come through, you're better off working with the image. So I'm just going to do an image trace. Black version, open. And this is one way that we can put in that white edge as well. So we've got trace outer edge only on, but we can see that it's not pulling it up quite as well as it should. Now, if we reduce the number of colours and go to preview, sometimes that will work. And there we go. Nice and easy. We'll go OK. Now if that didn't work, you could use your enhanced image tracing just to help you. Usually that would be because there's a gap in your line work somewhere. Okay, so I'm going to zoom out. And it now has this as a group so that you've got that cut line and the image. So I'll shrink that down. And I'm going to move this up here. So if I put him over something that's coloured, you can see at the moment he's still transparent. But we can actually fix that really easily within our group. So I'm going to click on that outer cut line. So just that is highlighted in the blue. And I'm going to fill it with white. Okay, so at this point you're like, oh no, I've lost my gnome. No, you haven't. He's still there underneath. So I'm going to take that there and I'm just going to drop it down and pop it behind. So then we can select that group and we can overlay over the top. And we can have that white background. So let's scale them down. I might do a bigger version of that original label just so that you can see the difference. So let's get that group there. Computer's on a little bit of a go slow, but it's okay. I'm just going to duplicate that, bring that over. I'm going to delete the gnome out of that group because we're going to be replacing him. So group. Now, if we wanted to then go to a portrait label, what we're actually going to want to do is just rotate it rather than being tempted to stretch it. otherwise that scallop around the outside won't be quite so accurate. I'm just going to click and drag a corner, not too big, about yay. Okay, so now let's get me gnome. And our group is sitting underneath the group that we've just duplicated. So let me drag that inside. Okay, now I need to rotate them around the right way. And that's because that group's rotated, so it's assumed that you want your gnome to rotate as well. It's like, no, don't need him rotated, thank you. So we can just do any tweaks that we need to for size. At the moment, he's still that white and black gnome. Now, if we take that group and drag it down underneath the orange, tint that orange, so it changes the line work, and he's going to get a bit more of a kind of chocolate and peachy look. And you may want to then change the tone of that shadow just so that it's not quite so dark. And job done. So we've got kind of a vintage vibe going on now with our little sticker. So there's lots of ways that we can work, although you can perceive that Canvas Workspace is limited in some ways. You just have to work out the workarounds to get where you want to go. Okay, so there is lots of fun ways that we can work with shapes in Canvas. It's not all about the cut line or the draw line. Okay. So we've nearly finished our sheet and we're ready to move on to the final checks. So what we want to do in this stage is just go through and check that all the things that we want to cut are set to cut, all the things that we don't want to cut are set to draw. Okay. Images obviously will never do either, but all of the other shapes that we've added to our sheet, so all the circles, all of the elements within the labels, then we need to make sure that those aren't cutting the outside need to cut. So for instance, I'm going to click on the first group and you can see it's going to highlight this label down the bottom. At the moment the text is set to cut. Well, that needs to change to draw. Okay, and we're going to do the same for all of the remaining shapes that we don't want to be cutting. Now we could take all of our cut lines out and put them into a separate group, but for this particular setup, what I would say is you don't really want to be doing that because there's too many elements which are both printing and cutting. Okay, now where we have a group that we need to change to draw, we can actually do it as a group and just set that group to draw, and sometimes that's just quicker. So with this one we want to keep that outside shape cutting and our text is going to be drawn on the top. Okay, so text is on draw. Just always just check that we haven't accidentally used a cut version of our image onto a sticker anywhere, and just work your way through slowly and methodically. So for example, here we've used that white backed gnome and that's still got that background as a cut, so we want to set that to draw in this case. And if ever you're not sure, if you just click on the item, it's going to highlight it on the document for you. And again, here we've got that white background, we just want to draw it. And you want to make sure that base shape is still uncut. So back to our text, and we can set those to draw. Scroll down a few more, do it again. Draw. Draw. Okay, nearly there, just a few more to do. So this one's correct, these need to go to draw. Again, it's those bits of text, so as we've changed it on one, we'll have to change it on the other. Scroll down, it should be at the bottom of the image. Okay, so if you are on the online version, sometimes you can check the cut lines and stuff. It'd be useful if that picture ported across just so that we could do that, but unfortunately not assuming it at this stage. Okay, so we've got everything as ready as we think it possibly could be. Okay, now if you want to hide your cut lines or certain things, you can hide them. Now I'm going to leave them on invisible just to show you what the difference is, okay? But in terms of creating your own, let's just very quickly, I'll just do a little bit of an example here. So our bigger gnome, if we click on him, and if we click on something, it's easy to find it in the layers panel then. So just got to look for the blue line. There's our cut line. Okay, so we can set that cut line to white. It's still there, it's still at 100%, it's just that it's white. And I just think that's just going to help us out when it comes to cutting it a little bit better. So it's the only one that really stands out from the crowd as kind of needing it, but I'll leave one with that black outline so you can see the difference. So I'm going to go to File, Export PDF. Now if we were to choose images only at this point, only our gnomes are going to transfer. Now obviously see, that's not what we want to do. Okay, instead we can do all visible layers. Now I've just noticed that our labels have this black outline on. Now I think for this one I'm not going to worry too much, but if you are wanting to remove that outline, you're going to want to go through and just do those very quick. So I'm going to do all visible layers, so even those lines that are just cut lines, like the line around our gnome, are going to come through with this option. Okay, it's then going to say where do you want to save it. So I'm just going to pop this onto the desktop for now, just because that's where my Canvas workspace file is, and we're going to save it there. Okay, now we have a couple of options in terms of materials. We could be working with a sticker sheet, we could be working with vinyl. So I'm going to swap over to a different camera and then show you how we can choose. Okay, so we have a few different options when it comes to printing. Now, one of the things I've pulled out is your typical sticker sheet paper. Now, if you have something like this where it's already pre-cut, then in actual fact you are probably better off using the Illustrator plugin for that, because then you can control the size and placement of your registration marks much more than what you can from Canvas. So that's just something to bear in mind. I wanted to point that out. So that's one option, is that you go down normal sticker paper. You can use just printable vinyl. So you can get printable vinyl for both laser and for inkjet, but they do vary between the two as to which you use them for, so that's something to bear in mind. Make sure you get the right one. And then finally we have the dedicated silhouette doming kit. So if you have this one, a couple of things to bear in mind: this isn't A4, so you need to be using the letter size on Canvas, and it comes in several bits. So you have your printable sheets, so this is what you print your registration mark and artwork onto. Then you have a separate clear vinyl that goes over the top after printing. So once everything's dry, then you can put your clear vinyl on top. Now we can do this with normal sticker paper too. If there's something that you want to keep waterproof, then go over the top with just some clear vinyl. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a sheet format like this. For instance, I have a clear vinyl roll that I will apply to things that maybe might be used as sticker books, so that you can peel the sticker back off and carry on using. And there's lots of different things you can do with clear vinyl, and it really does extend the reach of your products. And of course, being part of the doming kit, it also means that you can use resin on top. So you would use a 2-part resin with all the safety precautions taken, obviously, and then set that to one side after cutting. Apply your resin, let it set, and away you go. So those are your options for printing. Now, I'm going to take the printable vinyl and I'm going to pop that into my inkjet. Okay, so one of the things you'll notice when you pull your printable vinyl out, particularly with inkjet compatible printable vinyl, is it's going to feel like it's just a stiff piece of card. So you do want to just make sure that you slightly peel back one corner and make sure you know which side is sticky and put that the appropriate size side for your printer. So printer loading does vary between machines and models, so it is worth double checking, and you want it so that your sticky side is on the side where the lines are on the little icon on your printer. So I'm going to peel back just a little bit like this, pinch the two corners, see which one holds your thumb. So it's fairly obvious straight away which one that is. So this is the side you want to print on. So I'm going to pop that in the printer and then we can hop over to Acrobat. So now we have our paper loaded in our printer, it's the right way round, it's time to actually do our printing. So I've opened up the PDF file that we exported into Acrobat. So this is Adobe's PDF reader. Now, I work with the full version of Acrobat, but you can download Adobe Reader, which is basically like their skeleton version of it, that is going to work with your files just fine. You could also use several other PDF readers. So one of the joys of the PDF format is that it's pretty open, so you'll find there's lots of editors and readers that you can use with it. So where do we go from here? We are going to go to File and Print. Make sure that you have the right printer selected up at the top of the dialog box. We're only going to do one copy at first because we want to check that everything is okay and functioning properly. Once you've done your first initial test, you are only limited by how much ink is in your printer. So if you want to do 100 copies of the same label and then get the machine to cut those out, that's fine too. So you would just literally go through the same process again and again. Okay, now there are some advanced print settings as well, but for what we're doing, we don't really want to get involved with that. Next important bit to note is page sizing and handling. So you can see at the moment it's shrunk to fit. Now, when we size to fit, what it does is it takes that full A4 sheet right from corner to corner and shrinks that so that that is within the printable area of your paper. Now, obviously that could be wasting a little bit of paper if we leave that as is. So the other option that we have is we can use custom scale. Now that's automatically going to go up to 100%, and you can see that our registration marks are off our printable area. So we've got like a grey line here. So we want to shrink those so that our guidelines stay within our printable area. So one way to do that is to just key in an amount, and I'm just going to click back on the all just so that it takes up 97%. You want to look back at your preview. Now this isn't the easiest on a small screen, I will give you that, but there isn't much way of a way around it. So for instance, we can't drag that out any bigger, so you're going to have to go and take a bit of a judgment call. So I think these look like they dip a bit too much too close to our printable area just here. So I'm going to take that down to 96. Click back on all so that it takes that 96 and refreshes that preview. And we can go, okay, that's looking a bit more like it. And then it's just over to your machine. Now, some printers will want you to go into the individual printer settings and choose the material. Others are happy to just kind of guess what you're doing and kind of sense their own material. So if you need to change your printer material, you're going to do that in the printer button down here, and that's going to open your normal printer dialog box that you are used to seeing. But just bear in mind that any change you make in there will then affect your preview, so you just want to double check again that nothing has shifted. Okay, finally in Acrobat you're going to have the option down here, comments and forms. Just make sure that that says document, just in case you have been working on a file for a while and you might have annotated it, so you just want to have that hidden away. And if you need to learn more about Acrobat, I'm happy to go into that in a bit more detail another day. Just all you have to do is ask. Okay, and you do have the option for printing in grayscale if you want to save a bit of ink. So that can be good for if you want to do like a draft copy onto some scrap paper, just to check that your positioning is okay. And there we go. Now I am thinking, but I'm just going to take that down just one more notch down to 95, just because I'm wanting to make sure that these little targets are definitely within there. And there we go. And that's still larger than that fit to paper. So we're good to go. We're going to hit print, and that's going to come out of our printer, hopefully. Okay, and here's our finished sheet. So what do you want to look for once you've done this printing? Number one, you want to check each of your registration marks are nice and clear and not fuzzy. So if you have a printer, particularly inkjets that have gone a bit well, let's just say they're spattering a bit, then make sure you do a print head realignment and then try again, because these need to be nice and clear and legible to print. If you're working with a laser and your colour toners are slightly out of whack, then you can find that sometimes you get a bit of a haze around your targets. So just double check those as well, because we want to keep these as rounded and as clear as possible. So if, for instance, you hadn't sized it quite right and you got a flat bit down this bottom edge, it is going to throw a bit of an issue. So we can now see that this cut line that I was saying about is now visible on our print, whereas the other two that we've hidden away are not. Likewise, we've done some colour borders to go around our stickers, and we've used that line width again just to give ourselves a kind of a fake bleed. And likewise, we can see the black outlines on our shapes. So just something to bear in mind, that when you're designing what you want your finished sticker to look like once it is actually cut. Now, next we need to take our mat. Now, good news is you don't need a super sticky mat for this, but it does need to be able to go through the machine and back out the other side in terms of reading all of these registration marks. Now, these stickers are pretty directional. You know, we've got text that shows which way up these need to go. If you aren't working with text, you need to remember which way around your registration marks go. You need the flat line to the top. Now, it does tell you on your scan and cut on the actual screen, so don't think I'm never going to remember this. It's going to remind you, and it's going to tell you if you've done it wrong. So don't panic. Moving back to canvas, so you can see that we've got all of our elements here. We're going to go to file, and we're going to transfer it as if it was any other document. It's no different. Now, it is going to throw up some interesting issues. So we have the settings of lock unlock on this data are invalid. Yes, that's fine. We know that we're not going to keep everything locked. But it doesn't matter because we've got these registration marks on. So it's going to export it as a registered file. Tiny objects are automatically removed when converting to FCM because it's too small to cut. Now that to me says that there might be something that we've missed in terms of the text, and I can see one from here. And the image data will not be exported again. Nothing unusual there. So we're going to go OK, and I'm going to go cancel for now. So if I go over here, I can see that my top line of text was just missing being set to draw. Let's try it again and see how it goes. So file, export. Okay, it still says this tiny object. Well, we know that there are no tiny objects. So again, OK and cancel. So let's go through and see if we can see what it's upset about. And sometimes when it's a bit laggy, as mine is today, you might miss one or two. So let's go on the group. That's on the label. That needs to be draw. Group. That's on the label. That needs to be draw. Okay, fair enough. Scroll down. We've got draw, 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 draw. Cut for our cut line. That's right. Draw, draw, cut line. And if we always are checking by going across, we should be able to see straight away where things have gone a bit awry. So all those should cut, that's correct. Okay. So we just want to double check that nothing is going to cut where it shouldn't. Let's try it again. So file, export. Okay, there's still something lurking. So if we go OK now, and we transfer it across via the internet. Now I'm going to wake up with the scanning cup. Okay. While that's pondering, let's change view. So I'm going to go to the overhead. So we've got our sheet loaded, and let's go across the screen cam. Oh, let's lift that up a bit. Okay, so I'm going to cancel that for now. Go to retrieve data. The internet is going to have a think about it. Okay. Now, because there are a lot of stickers, you're going to see that you've got a lot of information, and aha, we can see straight away where the little issue is. So up on this sticker here, we can see that that text is in black. Now, if we were to send this to cut, it's going to cut out that text, which we don't want it to do. So we're going to hit the back button. We're going to go back to canvas, to that line or that group, so that we can click on it and find it in our document. Okay, and there we go. Sometimes in complex files it's easier to do it that way so that you can see where the issue is. And then we can transfer that again. it's still saying that warning. So let's just go OK and cancel. And because we use a duplicate, I'm just going to check the other version of that same sticker, just in case we manage to miss it twice. Okay, it's not that one because we've got that one set to draw. And as we haven't sent this again yet, we can still download it into our machines and just help us to locate that particular issue. So I can't see anything on there beside that one. So it could be thrown up the circles on our little word labels as an issue. Really shouldn't to that size, but is it possible? But everything else is looking okay. So I think on this occasion I'm just going to let it go for it and see how it goes. So let's go File, Export. Okay. Transfer it via the internet. Okay. I'm going to go home to reset, retrieve data, and back to the internet. So as I said, when it comes to loading up that file initially, then you can find it sometimes take a bit of time when you've got lots of little stickers. It's much quicker if you are working on larger objects, because Print to Cut isn't just about sticker design. There's lots of other things that you can do with it. So you can potentially do your entire card design, for instance, on one mat and then print that out and off you go. Okay, so we can now see that our little words are all now blue, which is what they should be. There's nothing else sitting within something else that is black, so again that's good. I'm going to go OK. And here's that reminder that I said about. So please attach the material printed with the registration marks on mat. Make sure the lines are at the top. So we've already done that. So let's go OK. We're going to load the mat. Okay, and you're going to see that when we go through to this next stage, then your registration marks vanish off your preview, because it's not actually going to cut those. So that's worth bearing in mind if it's something that you are doing that you're not going to potentially be cutting into those areas, even though they're kind of for office use only, I suppose would be the way of putting it. We can check our registration marks. So if we do that, it's also going to check that we can get that mat through successfully. So we're going to go start, and then it's going to feed through. Okay. So we can now see a scan of our sheet as well as having checked our registration marks. So it's really useful if you have a batch of things to do where you have several different cutting sheets and several different cutting files, because we can export these registered cutting files to a USB. So if you have a particular set of labels that you are doing for maybe an event, you can work your way through different cutting files and different cutting sheets. Now it's not going to identify that for you if you accidentally get the wrong one, so you want to make sure that you're relying on a scan that you can see that everything is lined up and all as good as. Okay, we're going to go into please select, and on this occasion I think, it's only thinking, let's get me a blade out. So I'm going to go for the vinyl blade for this one, just because we're going to be working with half cut. So we're going to go cut, please cut at last. Now what that actually means is please cut last. It didn't need the at in it. So what they're saying is basically before you do any cutting, do all your drawing. Now I would agree with that process if you are doing a full cut. With half cut it's a little bit different. You don't have to worry quite so much, but a full cut potentially when you're drawing after you've cut, you could be potentially moving elements on that sheet as you draw, so it's just safer to draw versus then cut. So I'm going to say okay, because I don't actually have any intention of drawing all those elements. So now you can just see your cut line. So this is a good opportunity just to check round and just have a look, see if there's anything that's going to be cutting that you don't want to cut. Now I'm going to go into settings, and then we can choose our cut settings. Now we have got a bit of a wiggly line around our gnome, so I'm just going to lower that cut speed. In terms of cut pressure, we can ignore this section entirely because we're going to go down, we're going to turn half cut on, and we're going to leave that cut pressure on auto. So generally with half cut, if we leave it on auto, we get the best results. Now, weeding box. If you are working with stickers that you have designed well within your little target zone as such, that you're actually going to have as an actual cut sheet, that maybe you've got two up on a page, then you can put your weeding box in just to help you kind of cut those ready for sale. It's entirely up to you, but on this occasion, because I've gone right up to those edges, we're going to leave that off. So if we go OK, we're going to see that it's going to tell us in our little preview, half cut is on, speed is at 1, and our pressure is at auto. So that's totally ignoring our normal pressure setting because that half cut is on. Okay, so now there's nothing left to do but to start it. So we're going to go start, and it's going to do that scanning and positioning again. And the reason being, in case you haven't done that initial scan process, or if things might have moved, it's just kind of reaffirming exactly where it is so that it can go. Then it's going to start cutting, so let's pop that over. Okay, so we are now cutting out those lines, and it's going to work through that process of actually cutting all those lines that you've set to cut. Now, the targets do help it to stay pretty accurate. If you're having issues with things not aligning with print to cut, chances are you need to do a recalibration of your machine rather than it being an issue with the actual print to cut itself. But it is worth bearing in mind, is your mat sticky enough? Is there any debris that is trapped under your mat that might have moved the head in a way that it wasn't expecting? I also wouldn't advise doing this on a newly sticky mat either. So if you've gone through and you've restuck your mat, this is not the project to get it back into action with. Okay, so now that we've finished cutting, we can remove it from our mat. Now, one of the joys of doing it this way is that, let's say for instance you've got to this point and you removed it from the machine and it hadn't cut, you're going to be able to pop it back in and it's going to read those registration marks again and be able to cut in the same place. So let's just see if we can get one of these to pop off. So I'm going to start off with one of the lozenge labels. So there we go, and we can see if I kind of get it to focus on my hand, not on the background. There we go. We've got a black outline that goes around the outside, so that's why I was saying you need to colour your cut lines to match, and then you won't have that kind of black halo. Now, remember how we also set up some of these to have a bleed. And I've managed to add this to my mat because it's so warm today, but never mind, we'll get there. Okay, so we did some of these where we had the bleed using that line width function. Now, if I just pop one of these out, and like so, we can see that we've got this lovely border detail, but remaining on our mat is the outside edge of that line. Okay. So let's hold these up a bit closer so you can see how those look compared to how they looked on screen. So if you wanted to have this look a bit more shadow-like, we could have used our opacity, just lower it down slightly, just so that we kind of get that hint of that colour through. So I don't think that you have to kind of try and do that entirely by hand. But it's not done too bad. The cut is good. And there we go. We have our sticker sheet. Thank you for joining me. And I look forward to seeing you on Tuesday for a bit more in-depth look at what we can achieve with our print to cut. Bye for now.